In this video, I'm trying to do some data scraping from a web page to Excel. Here is a disclaimer for you. I must frequently update my student list with new admissions, and that's a constant headache. So I read that UIPath could actually do it. I should say that I'm not a techie or an expert, just a lazy noob trying to simplify some common repetitive tasks. So don't ask any questions. This is a personal documentation for future reference. That's about it. Okay, guys? The objective for today's video is to scrape data table from a web page, sort the data, write to an Excel that has been pre-formatted, and then print it to a PDF file so that I can just print it off, the document whenever I need it. Mostly these are forms where I can enter data like marks or attendance. That's the whole objective. Now, before you start, these are some of the things that you may want to do. Download and install the UIPath Community Edition. You may have to create an account for this. Add UIPath browser extensions depending upon whether you are using a Chrome, Edge, or Firefox. You can do that in UIPath. Under Manage Packages, you may want to add UiPath Excel activities if you want to actually use Excel in UiPath for automation, which also implies that you either have Excel or maybe it's a good idea to install Excel. You can have a work around it using the workbook in UiPath. Probably you'll have to do some reading or watching some videos for that. Now, when we are actually doing or creating an automation using UiPath, some frequently used terms you will see in the UiPath, there is a processes tab. There are activities which you will be doing, a number of them. I've just picked a few which we will be using. There are many activities for doing many different processes. So you got to be familiar with sequence, data scraping, how to open a browser, how to do stuff in Excel, most of which is done in one of those Excel application scopes, which you can find under activities. How to read a file from Excel and write a file to Excel, read each row or each column as the case may be, add a filter if you want to actually output only the data that you need after scraping. And most of this information can also be manipulated in properties under the tab on the right side, which you can see. You can make changes there, create your variables and stuff over there. To add a variable, the best way is click Ctrl+K. You can add a variable and you will see it being done in some of the cases. The data table that we are going to scrape is https://datatables.net. Right now I'm opening UiPath. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a process. So in order to do that, I'm going to the UiPath Studio. I'm going to close this opening tab. And you can see processes over here, and that's where I click to create a new process. And in the process, I can create the workflow needed for my project. Okay, I've given a short description so that later it'll tell me how to do it. Now, I also want to store this file in a certain location. So I'm going to open the location. Yeah, data scrape. I'm going to create a video for this. So that's the folder. Select the folder, data scrape video, and that's the whole idea. So let's select the folder and create. So my file has been created, and you can see on the left side the main.xaml. That's a file that I will be opening to do the activities. And so that's seen on the project tab over here. So if I click on the activities, this is where I will find the activities like sequence, write, read, open browser, etc. So we are going to project and we're going to double click on main.xaml. That's where I'll be working. So this is the work area where I can actually add in activities and sequences. So if I click on activities, I can start adding stuff over here. So that's how you open a file, and you have a tab over here, ribbon over here with all the information that you need. I'm kind of using the classic version of the tab. So that's what you are seeing here. So data scraping, this is what we're going to use to obtain data from a website. We will see how we are going to use it in a few short minutes. In order to proceed with the data scraping and creating an Excel sheet with the new data, I created a workflow so that I can understand what exactly was happening. This is what I wrote it down. This is not an official thing. I just made it up for my understanding. So if you look at it, it looks something like this. We open a website, and the address for the website that I'm going to open today is here. Then I perform data scraping using the data scraping icon on the ribbon. Scrapes the data from the above website, and you will see how it is done in the video. And then it creates a virtual data table and writes this data to the data table and stores it in a variable so that we can use it in the subsequent steps. Well, I don't know if it will make a lot of sense as to what I said, but that's the way it works. The next step is the data that is actually stored virtually in a variable. I want to filter it. I do not want all of those values on my Excel sheet. I just need some of them. So I'm going to actually filter the data, and this has to be done in Excel application scope. Okay, so we're going to choose a filter option there. And after that, the data that is obtained there, I will output it into a data table. So I will create a new variable and store the filtered data into the new variable. So what I will be really using in the final Excel is the filtered data. So two virtual data tables are created. First, the original one from scrapping, second one after filtering. And finally, I use a write range to write this data into Excel. So write the filter data to formatted Excel. You don't have to format the Excel. For ease, if you want to take the Excel and just print it into a PDF file or into a document, it's kind of easy. You can avoid one step. So that's what I really have in mind, and this is what I'm planning to execute. So I will quickly show you what I've already done and see how the output looks like, and then I will show how I created the UiPath workflow. Okay, that's it for the workflow that I generated in this slide. So I have started my UiPath. I have created a process here which is called scrape data from web to Excel. That's how I named it. I'm going to open it up right now. Okay, I've opened the UiPath, and it is the file that I should be now opening to actually see what I have created is I have to go to main.xml. That is under projects. I will see that there. And I actually have created the workflow, and I generated the files I needed before creating this video. So I will first of all show you that, and then I will show you what files I generated and what I really wanted. So this is the workflow I created. Like I showed in the previous slide, I opened the browser, did the data scraping. I have the scrape data and the data table here. And then I went down, I did some filtering. So this is done in Excel application scope. I did the filtering, and after the filtering, I wrote it into an Excel file. That's what I've done. So this is all the whole features I have here. So the files that I got without filtering and the files that I got after filtering, I'm going to show you. So if I go to the folder where I stored those files, so there are two Excel files here. This file called name list will actually show the data that I obtained when I scraped the web and wrote it to the Excel file with no filtering. Let's see how it looks like. So this is what I got after extracting the data from the web. I got the first row says the header, name, position, office, age, start date, and salary. I have a lot of information here. I've got about 57 records or rows, as a matter of fact. But in my activity, I only need 30 rows. The number of students in my class is around maximum will be 30 to 35, 30 mostly. So I want to keep it at 30. So, and I don't need all the information. This is not a student list. I just wanted to use it from a public data that's available here. I only need the student name to be shown in my Excel sheet for now. Sometimes I will need to extract the phone numbers and email addresses too for communication. Then I will choose an option to filter them appropriately. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the data directly by using the UIPath and only obtain the names of the students after filtering. Okay, so we will run that application and see what we will get after filtering. So I'm going to close this file, and the file that I'm going to write the name into, it's a new file. It's called filtered name list. So actually I created a formatted Excel sheet here. So I have course name and I have 10 entries which I can add to. If I print it off, I will print it off on a letter size paper. And I want the names to start appearing at the fifth A5, the fifth row, column 1, that is A5. Okay, so that's what I want to happen. So we're going to run the workflow that I created, and then we will see what outcome we will get. So A5, I have to make the change there when you write it to the Excel. That's the only thing I have to do, I believe. So here at the moment it is showing A2. I'm going to change it to A5. That should do it. I'm going to save the file, and I'm actually going to run this flow which I created. So the workflow is complete. Let's go back and open that file and see what we have there. So this is the created file. Let's see how it looks like. So in order to do that, let's start building the workflow. I had been showing you the main XAML, which I created earlier. And now I'm going to close it. And I'm going to open a different XAML file so that I can start building from the beginning. Okay. So the first thing that I'm going to do, based on the PowerPoint presentation that I made earlier, you will see that I have to open the website. That's what I'm going to do. that's what I'm going to do first. Open browser. So I'm going to drag and drop that over here. And now I have to enter the URL. So I'm going here. This is the website that I'm going to use for collecting the data or scraping. Copy, and I'm going to paste the URL within quotes in here. Press enter. So the little icon that shows the error is gone. So we have done the first step, open browser. The second thing we want to do is we want to do some data scraping. So I'm going to double click on that one. So when I double click on that one, also go back over here. The data scraping. Okay, so select a value, open your browser, press next. So I'm going to click next. So I'm going to point my mouse at the name in the table. That is actually a header. Click on that. You selected a table cell. Would you like to extract the data from the whole table? The answer is yes. So you can see that it has extracted the first page. Okay, let's also see. Yeah. So then you want to look at the bottom, edit data definition. You have, so here we have an option, edit data. So we're going to look at all 100, but we need only 30 rows, 30 rows of data. So I'm going to put 3, click finish. Identify the element that navigates to the next pages, because we have about 6 pages and we need 30 values. We need at least 3 pages as a matter of fact. So we're going to select yes. And then we were going to select this button next. So it'll automatically go to the next pages. So click yes. Identify. Okay, it has been identified correctly. We have selected that. Now, if you actually come down, this is the data table that we just extracted. And we are going to create a variable to actually identify that one. It's already here, but I want to rename it. In order to do that, I'm going to select Control K and then data table underscore name list. Okay, so we have created a variable. Let's check whether the variable is here, what the properties are. So we are selecting the variables, data table, name list. Let's delete this, that is not part of it now. This is the name list that we create. This is the database variable that it created right now. It's going to be data scrapping. We have done that. So we have validated it. Save it. Next, what we need is we need to take the variable that we have stored with the data table information and we have to write it to Excel. So we're going to use the Excel application scope. So select Excel, gives you application scope, drag and drop it over here. Now we have to give the location of the Excel that we are going to work on. So we're going to select the folder. So this is the folder, this is the file that I'm going to work on. It's called filtered name list. I'm going to call it filtered name list because I want to filter the data that is going to come through into this Excel. So, okay, and then I have to write it onto the Excel. So I'm going to write right range is the next activity we are going to do. Right. It's right range under Excel. We're going to drag and drop it in here. So when you write it, it's going to be written into the sheet number 1, and the cell into which we're going to write is going to be A5. Okay, so for now, I'm not going to enter the data table because I have to create a filter. So let's save this. Okay, now we need to add a filter. That is, the data that's coming from here has to be filtered and then written into this file. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to choose a filter. Cell filter, the right filter. Let's do the data table filter and configure it. Okay. Okay, data table. So the data table that we're going to use is coming from DT name list. That's the data table that we created here after scraping. And we're going to write it into a new table. Okay, so we're going to create a new variable, Control K, and data table filter name list. Okay, that's your new variable. Let's go and check the variable properties. So filter name DT filter name list, and that's going to be, that's a do. We'll leave it as do. Okay, and then we need to configure it. We don't need to do anything with the rows. We want to work with the columns. So we have about 6 columns there. If you look at the Excel sheet, if you go back to the Excel sheet here, if you look at the columns that we have in the data table, that is in this one, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is 0, which we want. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 we don't need. We're going to filter it out. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 5 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So filter and remove column 1, column 2, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5. So okay, theoretically that should work. Okay, so then what we have is, now we have to take the data table that we get filtered and write it into the Excel sheet, which we already specified, and the data comes from DT filter name. That's what we are going to use. Okay, so all the errors are gone. Technically everything seems to be good, so let's save it and run it. Let's see what happens. If we should debug it, we can just run and see if it works. I don't see any errors, but I don't think it would have returned to it. So let's stop recording here. Let's take a look at the name list, filtered name list. we do have the names. There you go. So we have all the names. It's filtered and it has been added into this list. So since we started at 5 and 30, yes, we have the 30 names in it. We have successfully filtered the table. Okay, so once again, if you go into the folder to the Excel files, this is the original data table that we extracted from the website, which has 6 columns, and we could extract about 57 entries, I believe, 56 entries with the titles. What we did is, from this Excel, we removed columns 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then we got, that is by filtering, we got this particular sheet where we actually had a formatted Excel into which we wrote the first and last name in the first column. And that's how we can convert the data from a website or a web table. We scrape it using UiPath and write it into as Excel using a filter to obtain only the data that we want. So technically we are done here.